Hey, good evening and welcome everybody. It's Ukraine Update here with the Shills, and we're going to turn right over to Operator Starsky. This is all surrounding the helicopter crash that just happened in Ukraine there, and it's a pretty personal story to him. So he's going to tell us about his day and how everything went.
Thank you, bro. Yes, so the main news of today is that today we had funeral, and I think a couple of thousand people arrived to this funeral to say the final goodbye to Minister of Interior of Ukraine, Denis Monastyrsky, and his team that died in the crash, unfortunately killing some civilians, including children. It's a horrible tragedy for Ukraine, and I was there with my command as well, and I had opportunity to say goodbye to Mykola Anatsky. He was a press officer of the Ministry of Interior. Prior to that, we worked together in the National Guard of Ukraine. He was my close friend. And last year in March, his kid was born. His daughter was born. She's like less than 1 year old. And it was really hard, actually. This guy himself, he was almost like, to me, he was a hero. He was awarded many times. In 2014, he fought in the volunteer battalion named after General Kluchitsky. It's a very famous battalion in Ukraine, and he participated in numerous combat operations. And later he joined press service of the National Guard. Basically, we have like this tradition that prior to joining press service, you gotta serve as an infantry for some reason. But we worked together a lot, and we had numerous mutual friends, and basically we spent a lot of time together in the National Guard. And the job of the press officer is kind of risky at times. A lot of people don't know that press officers must always be in the middle of events. I remember since 2018, when I had numerous deployments on the front lines, working with my guys, we always were there, because when fight starts, there must be somebody to tell about it, and to tell about our soldiers who fight. In Hostomel, I remember when we had this combat against Russian paratroopers, there was supposed to be another press officer, because we were all busy, and my biggest sorrow is that I didn't make any video for this reason. There must be a press officer. So I managed to say my final goodbye to my friend. What we know about this crash is there are two versions. One version is malfunction of the helicopter, because we know that it was having some kind of repairs. On the other hand, witnesses who saw this crash, they say that they heard explosion, and they saw this helicopter burning as it was falling down. And there could be sabotage involved, because there was a Minister of Interior together with all his team, together with his assistants, his deputies, and his press officer. And of course, Minister of Interior in Ukraine controls a lot of, I would say, crucial services, like border guards, like firefighters, rescuers, National Guard, which is second biggest armed force in Ukraine after the army. So it doesn't happen every day for them to fly together like that. That's why I suspect that there could be sabotage, of course, but we should wait for the end of the investigation, and then we will know all the details.
It sounds very likely like it could be a bit of a fishy situation. I'll be very interested to hear how that all plays out. Should we turn to Germany and the whole situation there? The whole thing seems to be getting out of hand. I would imagine that both Nick and Commander Macmillan here are definitely up on this topic, knowing the news hounds that they are. But Germany's getting backlash from other people now, and they're just stalling. Is there anything from your side news wise, the situation, Starsky, to bring a little clarity to anything?
I think they have some internal problems they should solve.
It sounds horrifically political, like just all kinds of nasty BS getting in the way.
Well, basically, that's what I tried to say.
I don't hold back as much. Yeah, Commander.
There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and obviously we're not privy to it, but the current speculation falls in a couple of categories. Number one is that they won't authorize transfer of Leopard tanks until the U.S. authorizes transfer of M1 Abrams. They don't want to be, the speculation is that Germany does not want to be seen as kind of leading the charge against Russia. They want to be seen as part of a team. There's issues with why the U.S. hasn't transferred Abrams. They're valid ones, but I still don't see that, given the situation, we couldn't find a way to work around it. The problem is the Abrams is a much more complex tank. It requires a hell of a lot more maintenance. To be used in its optimal mode, you need to use jet fuel for it because it's powered by a. It's basically powered by a jet engine. There are ways you can field modify, so you don't need to send it back to a factory. Field modify the fuel system so the engine will use like gasoline or diesel fuel or whatever, but it causes excess wear and tear on the engine itself, and it doesn't get anywhere near as good mileage, although 2 miles a gallon when it's operating on jet fuel does not strike you as the kind of car you want to drive cross country with.
No doubt.
Yeah. Now, the other associated problem is while you've had countries like Poland and Finland, I've even heard the Dutch have made an offer of transferring their Leopard tanks. That can't be done without Germany's permission, because every time you transfer major military equipment to another country, there's something called an end user agreement. This kind of similar to what you see on a lot of computer programs and such. Mm-hmm. And it's that I'll sell it to you, but you can't transfer it to somebody else or sell it to somebody else without my express permission.
Right.
So the Germans, even, they wouldn't have to tap into their own reserves of Leopard tanks. All they'd have to do is kind of say, yeah, you guys want to transfer tanks to the Ukrainians? Feel free, we're up on it, but they're not doing it. So there's more at play here than the Germans holding these tanks in reserve for themselves.
Right. Yeah, and I saw a thing. I saw a thing where one of Germany's holdouts is not until the U.S. steps in and sends Abrams. But like you were just saying, the Leopard's the far better solution right now.
Yes. But
I'm going to
Go ahead.
disagree, though. I'm going to suggest that the 2 miles per gallon on the jet fuel is perfectly acceptable if you have a 120 millimeter cannon, which is going to help you clear traffic in front of you. I'd be willing to. I'd put that for jet. I will take it. I will order one. It's going to make the morning commute a lot easier.
Oh, no, I agree. I think, honestly, what the better solution, if they wanted to work it this way, we have like 2,700 M1s in storage. So it's not like we don't have stuff to give away. But if they don't want to transfer the M1s to Ukraine, they could say transfer them to the Dutch or the Swedes or whoever and give them those tanks so that they could then transfer Leopards to Ukraine. So it'd be a 1-for-1 swap out. But I think that the key is Germany's waiting for somebody else to lead the charge. And right now they're under, as you said at the start of this discussion, they're under enormous political pressure from the US and from their NATO partners to do something about this. And they keep stalling and not doing anything. So it's hard to say what's going on. Now, I do want to caveat all this by saying the Germans have given Ukraine a lot of support already in other forms. They just haven't given these Leopard tanks or given permission for other people to transfer the tanks. So one of the arguments that's going on is that everybody's afraid that giving heavy tanks to the Ukrainians is an escalation which the Russians would react adversely to. So it's a fear of escalation is what it is. I don't necessarily buy into that, but that's one of the speculations.
Ukraine is kicking their asses. What the hell are they going to do against all of NATO?
Well, I don't mean it from that perspective. What I mean is the concern is if they transfer heavy tanks to the Ukrainians, that the Russians will then be forced to take some more drastic step to stabilize the situation in Ukraine. And the obvious
chemical and or nuclear.
Yeah, exactly. That's the obvious statement of what they would progress to. And once that happens, it almost inexorably draws NATO into the fight, whether they want to or not. And the fear, of course, is that you get a Russian on NATO fight, then you go into a massive nuclear exchange.
It still must be horribly frustrating because, you know, the war there isn't stopping and the tragedies are every day.
Oh,
this,
yeah.
This helicopter crash right on top of 45 to 50 right before that. Civilians, not even those that signed up to fight.
Yeah.
While they're playing, you know, who gets the tank, you know, then do other things, you know. Do a roundabout. You're all some damn clever politicians. There's plenty that can be done, needs to be done.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, so I attended one funeral last year. Starsky, how many funerals do you attend in a year now?
Oh, man.
It's
too many.
Not a number you want to think about.
Your face says it all, Starsky.
Yeah.
You don't even have to answer.
I cannot tell you the exact number, unfortunately.
But it suffice it to say, I mean, I would imagine it's at least once a month, or pretty close to that, at least, maybe more.
There were some funerals that I missed, actually.
Yeah.
I bet.
I missed a funeral of my good buddy battalion sergeant. We served together in the first company of the 1st Infantry Battalion when it was just being formed. And he was my squad leader for a while, by the way. He was a really courageous person. And he was bombed. He died together with our I think he was either company commander or deputy company commander. So I knew them both, and they died both near Kharkiv because of air bomb, actually. So they were bombed, and literally they turned to ashes. So not much left of them, and I missed those funeral because I was busy with other funeral. But I cannot tell you the precise number.
I don't need the precise number. I'm asking just because I think it's important to realize the human cost and how different your day-to-day life is than the day-to-day life of, I think, most of the people listening in the audience right now. I wanted to highlight that.
One time I was asked, I think I told you this story, I was asked to tell a small boy how his father died, because this boy, he was an autist, and he had this, his father was buried in the closed coffin because he was shot in the face with a heavy machine gun. And his wife asked to open the coffin for her and things like that, but our commanders did everything to convince her that she would not like to remember him like this. And because he was buried in the closed coffin, his son didn't realize that he was dead. And there were times when he was like showing signs that he knew that he was dead, but at some point he would ask his mother, like, when will our father return from the front line?
Man.
So psychologists told me to talk to this son, because I knew his father, and I was a military, so he would understand. And there was nothing harder in my life than that moment. Nothing at all.
Imagine. Oh man.
And but that's just me. There are people in my brigade, like our psychologists, who have to constantly call wives, mothers, parents, basically relatives, and report bad news. And we have our chief of the psychological service in my brigade. He's a young officer. He's already, oh my God, he's much younger than me, but he's already like a major, I think. And I remember when this invasion started, it was either March or April, and my brigade was fighting north of Kiev, near Vyshgorod, Huta, Mazhigirska, Petrivtsi, that direction. We had some losses there, basically because we had to hold the ground. Russians already realized that they, with that personnel that they had, they could not withstand contact combat against us. That's why they literally shelled our positions 24/7. That's around the time when I started this blog, by the way. And so this chief of our psychological service called our deputy commander. He used to do that. He did that all the time. But at some point, we were sitting in the room, and our deputy commander said, like, I already informed 4 people, like 4 mothers and wives. Can you please do the 5th one for me?
Right.
And that young officer, I must say, he was very professional. I'm not sure if I could do that, but he called the wife of the dead soldier. He reported the bad news, And as soon as he was like very calm, he said it like in a calm tone, very professionally. I literally admire him. And when he told her the news, first thing I heard through his phone was like screaming,
Mm.
like there were no words. She was just screaming out of desperation. And I was just standing there, just looking at him. And he then talked to her, tried to, to calm her down, and tried to talk to her and things like that. And then he just hung up the phone and took a cigarette and went out. He was calm because he was a professional, he was a psychologist and things like that. But I can just imagine what happened inside of him. It was crazy. And there are people who actually, it's their job. They call those wives, mothers, fathers, almost like every week when we have losses. You cannot imagine it.
Thank
Reality.
you. I'm sorry to have harped on that, but there's an audience, and I think it's worth people knowing why it's so important to support Ukraine. So thank you, and I'm sorry.
Indeed. Let's
We are.
Claire, do you want to grab that super chat, and then I think Dave's got some
Sure.
questions for us.
Yes, from Zong 1103, thank you very much. A message. Our hearts go out to you. And I think we all can agree the realities of war on the people and that is affected. It's really hitting home today. And we're with you, if anything, Starsky. It's all we can do, as frustrating it is right now. You're not alone.
Thank you.
I just was getting notified in the chat there. The child you were talking about earlier there, Starsky, was on the autism spectrum as well, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we try to, because families of our fallen soldiers, they eventually become our families, because we participate in everything, in every aspect of their life. When their kids go to school or graduate from schools and things like that, we are always there. We are always supporting them, and we are inviting them for every event that we have, like on our base or things like that. And one of our guys, he was from my brigade, of course. So at some point, this kid, he said, I want to learn what my father did. I want to try shoot a real rifle. And he said, sure, why not? So he advised to the widow what kind of rifle to buy, because she wanted to buy a rifle. And then they took this kid to a shooting range, and they showed him how to shoot rifle. And basically he enjoyed that, hitting targets. It's cool. But last year this guy died in a battle. So now a bunch of other guys are, like caring for this family. It's hard.
So you've had some recent successes, though. The military's had a few recent successes in the last week. Is that true?
Yes.
Could you
We
tell us
know
about that? Yeah.
you talking about Zaporizhia?
Yes.
Yeah. So in Zaporizhia, Russians attempted to develop their offensive operation, and they failed basically because they don't have enough personnel and enough vehicles and tanks. So the other day, the General Staff of Ukraine published a video of Russian troops walking in a big group of around 100 men, walking directly at Ukrainian positions, and probably trying to. I think Japanese had this like katana attack or banzai attack or something like that in the World War II.
I
Kamikaze.
vaguely remember, but yeah, Lance would,
Yeah,
Colonel
it-
McMillan would remember that.
They called it a bonsai attack. It was just typically done when you were running out of ammunition and you were in a losing position, and everybody just charged the enemy, trying to die an honorable death.
Yeah, so Russians have this zombie attack. They just walk towards you because Z stands for zombies.
Well, they have the no, well, the Russians I think should get credit for that attack that we had read about. That it's the attacks they do while fleeing and being chased by frightened Ukrainian soldiers, or pursued by terrified. They're valiantly the valiant retreat with
Heroically, heroic.
the heroic retreat while being pursued by terrified Ukrainian soldiers. Those attacks are just brilliant. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah. Fundamental difference between Russians and the rest of the world is that recently I received a bunch of commentaries from Russians that were actually like bragging. They were like, so how's things in Solidar? I'm like, you lost 20,000 men dead in Solidar and Bakhmut combined. What are you proud of? Solidar is not a major city. It's not a big city even. It's bigger than a village, smaller than a town, basically. You lost 20,000 men. Of course, majority of them were freaking convicts, but still. And that's the difference. They were bragging that they lost so many men. They took the settlement, which again, like controlling Solidar doesn't give you any strategic advantage, unless they want to outflank Bakhmut, which I think they will fail. Guys, it's so amazing to just analyze this huge gap between civilized armies and this zomboid army. It's like two parallel realities, guys.
Well, it's not much of a change from the Soviet army in the early part of World War II, where they hadn't quite learned how to fight, and it was just like, throw men at it, maybe we'll get lucky. And the casualty rates were just staggering.
They have this, yeah, they have this tendency for repeating actions, like they're throwing men over and over and over again. And the reason for that is, this old school colonels and generals, that they don't have this system that is very efficient and is used in NATO armies and in Ukrainian NATO as well. They don't have different services. They're S1, S2, S3. They don't have all that. One commander specifically creates this plan of the operation with arrows and things like that, and basically he designates targets and goals for every squad, and this squad has no authority at all. They must obey the order, and if the squad fails, another squad is sent to supplant the previous one. it's different philosophy, different mentality, and like it's two different worlds.
But
Operator Starsky.
there are
How do-
advantages. I mean, you're aware why the Russian tanks are so cheap to make, right? I mean, they only
Oh,
have
yeah.
to go in reverse.
I
Sorry, I
have a
cut you off.
question
Jim.
about the
That joke has been
culture.
used in every war.
Yes, it has. It was the first one I heard was the French, but it works here.
I have a question. Do you think the culture of Veranio, basically, that's a Russian word for going along with bullshit, even though everyone knows it's bullshit, contributes to the inefficiency of the Russians? You know, like someone calls, how's it doing? They're getting blown to hell, and they say everything's just fine.
There is one thing you should know about Russians, and specifically about KGB culture. So when KGB agents in their KGB schools are being educated, trained, right? One of the things they learn is that they should always deny facts. It's even when you're caught in a bed with your best friend's wife, you must always deny. Even if you have like cameras pointed at you, you gotta always deny the reality, right? You're dreaming. It's not me. It's not her, and he's not my best friend. And we didn't fuck. Those are not mine condoms. Like you gotta always deny, and the more you deny obvious facts, the more those people who have this weaker, I would say, weaker immunity to things like conspiracy theories and things like that, you know, they will start thinking, they will start having doubts. Like, what if it's true? What if it's not? Like, what if that dude is not his best friend for real? You know? And it works like that. Putin brought this culture into their elites, and their elites adopted this culture because it works. Because you know, there are always people who like to, let's say, justify criminals, and what they do is basically they try to understand motives and things like that that caused this specific criminal to do what he did. And when they're told about atrocities in Bucha, they start thinking, what caused Russians to do that? Because normal people don't do that, right? Something caused them to do that. Probably we should think. Probably, I don't know. Probably those civilians were saying bad words at Russians, and Russians became very angry because of that. It's like,
Or the
when
Russians didn't do it.
It's like, you know,
just
when
one lie after another.
yeah, mannequins, right? I saw a black bag moving, and it's like that. It's like generally why people justify this invasion in Ukraine. For the same reason, you know, people justify a rapist for raping a woman because she was wearing a very like small skirt, mini skirt, right? And that probably caused this crime to happen. So it's like blaming a victim, and I can understand that because, you know, in civilized world we are taught to try to understand people. It's our thing in the civilized world. We always try to understand motives and things like that,
Yeah.
because we care, because we care about things that can be solved, right? Because we understand that you gotta put all your efforts into finding compromises and things like that, like finding the same language with other people. It's important
That's
if you want to progress and develop and things like that. If you want to be successful, it's important. Orcs don't care what you think at all. That's why they always deny it, and they always deny obvious facts. And yeah, sometimes it works, because there are always people who try to not like justify criminals, but at least try to understand criminals.
Yeah.
There's a related issue here, and it's, for lack of a better word, subservience to authority. And you can see this in an anecdote I'm going to relate from Soviet times, but it's still very pertinent to what you're doing today in Russia. At one point, Beria, who was head of at that time, the NKVD, which became the KGB, Beria brought a list of people who were suspected of, anti-revolutionary activity or whatever, to Lenin to sign. Lenin looked at the list and then initialed it at the bottom and handed it back to Beria. And Beria turns around to his assistant, says, "Have everybody on this list killed."
Whoa, dude.
Yeah. And somebody asked him, all he was doing, Lenin was doing when he initialed it, is to just show that he had seen the list. Why did you order them killed? And his response, I think, speaks volumes about the Russian mindset. It's better safe than sorry. And he wasn't referring to the fact that these may be counter-revolutionaries. It's better safe than sorry to kill them. It's better to kill them than have Lenin question my motives for not killing them.
Wow. Oh.
Yeah.
And that's how 4 million people died under at least Stalin, outside of the food. There was a lot more who starved to death, but I think it was 4 million who died just from shooting and executions.
There's no sense of value for human life except among the very top level of people. Everybody else is just, yeah, we can kill 1,000 of them. Who cares? They're going to be another 1,000 that we can bring in tomorrow and replace them.
Was it Himmler? I'm trying to remember who it was. Was it Himmler? At first, I thought it was Stalin, but it may have been Himmler. One death is a it was Stalin. One death is a tragedy. 1,000 is a statistic. Is that Stalin?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that is Stalin. Yeah.
Yeah, a great way to show how a society that's supposed to be equal for all is done. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see, Dave, did we have a few viewer questions we should be getting to and whatnot?
Of course we do. We had one from Lorna who's asking, have you heard the US will allow partners to give Ukraine F-16s?
I think I heard talks, but nothing specific. Probably Commander Macmillan knows more than me.
Yeah. The biggest one that's in the news right now is that the Dutch, Holland, offered to give, Netherlands, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, they offered to give Ukraine, I think it was 24 F-16s, because they're about to replace them with F-35s or some other aircraft. I don't know. But they offered to give them, but they, as with the Germans and the Leopards being transferred, there is an end user agreement. So they have to get American, they have to get American permission because they're US original material before they can transfer them. And I have not heard anything specific yet about whether they've gotten that permission. I suspect that there are discussions ongoing about it. We will hear, I don't doubt for a moment, if they announce that they're not going to transfer them or if they are going to transfer them. All we know at this point is that the offer has been made and it's pending a U.S. resolution to the question.
Aren't we training Ukrainians to fly those?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are Ukrainian pilots being trained. I don't know on what airframes, but I would imagine that would be one of them.
Yeah. Didn't the Biden administrator just released on that the 2.5 billion aid package signed in the request that the training still be concentrated on and go forward?
Yeah.
I think that was the last statement that came out.
Yeah, the big issue is that you can train a guy to fire an artillery system or an anti-aircraft missile or drive a tank in a
Mhm.
couple of weeks, even months or whatever. But to train somebody to be proficient in a modern jet aircraft is probably a minimum of a year.
Right. Which is, it's hard to hear statements like that when they actually need
Yeah.
They're
hard
lucky.
artillery right now, like right now.
Yeah, lucky bastards, because
Exactly.
pilots always get everything better.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, they have the most fancy uniform. Girls always like pilots. They prefer pilots over infantrymen, even though infantrymen they're real heroes and things like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, but pilots get everything.
Yeah, one of the things that has been discussed is trying to get any of the former Warsaw Pact countries who still have former Soviet equipment, aircraft specifically, to transfer those to Ukraine, because Ukrainian pilots are already familiar with those aircraft and those systems.
Mhm.
The trouble is, most of those countries have exhausted their supplies of those kind of aircraft. They've already transitioned to European or American built aircraft. So there aren't that many of them left. And those that are left are probably being used in the training role. So they're not the highly capable ones. They're mid-range, low capable ones. But the nice thing about any of those Russian systems, nobody has to worry about the end user agreement.
Oh,
Well, and the Russians probably have it a little bit easier. The Russians can train their pilots in about half the time, but that's because they don't have to train them to land.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's only about takeoff and shooting. Nobody cares about the rest.
Yeah, they won't need the rest. Trust, they won't. Once they go into Ukrainian airspace, they won't need to worry about the rest.
Mm.
Actually, it's a new top secret Russian military program called. It's like kamikaze drones, only without drones. It's just kamikaze.
Well, I hear to help with the growing of sunflowers, Russia's developing a new helicopter that's got ejector seats, so they can just shred themselves on the way out, and it just puts a lovely rain of fertilizer down on the ground for you guys.
Oh yeah, interesting fact, by the way. All the Ka-52 helicopters that were shot down over Hostomel, nobody ejected at all.
Wow.
Like they have this ejection system. Like
Yeah.
the propeller is ejected, and then the seat gets ejected as well,
Yeah.
with both pilots. Nobody ejected at all.
Yeah,
from
I
what
think
we saw.
that's uniquely one of the only helicopters that actually has an ejection system for the crew.
Yeah, but
You
they
think
never used
someone
it.
stole
Yeah.
the charges out of it?
No, no, couldn't possibly be that.
I think the buttons are just painted on. It's like I can see a Russian like pressing the thing. It's just painted on.
Yeah, they
And
got the
those are
talking
supposed to be
module
like
from.
flying.
Go ahead,
This
forward.
is supposed to be like flying tanks. And how thick would you say the armor was? You showed pictures of it.
There were like nothing similar to armor, from what I could see. My boys told me that they found a couple of pieces that looked like armor, but like if we're talking about a tank, when it's burnt down, you can see its body, the armor, basically.
Yeah.
Of course, there cannot be anything like that in a helicopter, because first of all, helicopter must be light, and this helicopter is Ka-52. It's light. I can confirm that, because it consists of some part of it consists from cardboard, thick cardboard, stabilizers, and I'm not
But it
kidding.
saves weight, so that's not. No, I'm serious. It's not as ridiculous as it sounds.
That's funny.
Yeah,
though.
exactly.
It's actually like corrugated aluminum, like kind of like cardboard, but with aluminum. It's structured that way.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, you could probably pierce the body with a handgun, maybe not the windows.
You can poke it with a knife. I had a piece
Yeah.
of Ka-52. I stole it from the airfield. Basically, it's like a piece of stabilizer, and it's made of like cardboard. You can poke it with a knife.
I have images of like lunar landers, the LEM.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there are helicopters that do have significant armor. The Mi-24 is a case in point. We used to call it the flying tank. It's not that heavily armored, but it's heavily armored enough that small arms fire does not pose a significant threat to it. And that's why when you get the situation in Afghanistan of us having to supply the Mujahideen with Stinger missiles and Russian heavy machine guns, because those were the only weapons that they had. They could take down that helicopter because it was so heavily armored. But a Ka-52, no, it's flying aluminum foil.
And don't those things shake the pilots, and they'd probably never be allowed in a NATO army because they're so not well balanced?
Yeah, it's true. So specialists saw this video of Ka-52 landing, I think, and its pylons were shaking like crazy. And they said that there's no way this helicopter would be accepted in a NATO army.
Yeah.
Wow. We'll switch over to Claire here. We got a super chat in.
Yes, from Isandring Persa. It says, "Good to see you, Starsky. And I've seen way too much of you, Nick."
That's Isandering, former co-host of In Time as of 30 seconds ago.
Sounds like my soccer account.
Yeah.
Oh, that's him. That's him.
Well, we thank you. We
Yeah,
thank
very
you,
much.
Isandring. Sorry, Nick.
No, most they thank you, Isandering. I'll be calling you right after the show.
Oh.
I don't know. I think there's a point to be made there, Nick.
I'm sure you do.
So let's go back to Dave here and see some more questions, or hear some more questions. I guess we're not seeing them. That was stupid. What am I talking about?
Let's express them like at the World Economic Forum through interpretive dance. There's one from Rodent who's throwing loads of questions down into the chat and does a lot in the background. Hello to you. What do you think about Russians underreporting their casualty numbers? I understand it's by a factor of 10.
That's what I noticed last year. So it's like when they were reporting Ukrainian casualties, they reported them multiplied by 10. And when they report their own, it's like they divided it by 10. So I think when they lost something like, it was first month, I think, of the invasion, they lost something like 5,000 men, according to the general staff of Ukraine. And they were reporting like a couple of hundreds of men died because we are so efficient. So
Wow.
it's like that.
Yeah, but it's important to note that this is being done not to convince the foreign world that the casualties are low. It's to keep their own people from knowing how bad things are. You got to remember that in the early part of the campaign, most of the assault columns were accompanied by mobile crematoria.
Yeah, they have that.
Yeah, to burn the bodies of their own soldiers, so that you couldn't.
Whoa.
Oh, seriously,
Hmm.
so that they could not be sent home and people wouldn't know they died in the war.
Which
Yeah, missed
incidentally,
in
what's
action.
the? I'm sorry.
Yeah, missed in action, and they don't have to pay their
Yep.
widows. They don't have to give them ladas.
What's the life expectancy of a mobilized orc? Is it still something like 12 days?
Yes, actually, it's between 10 and 14 days. The record was, I believe, 6 days. He got
Wow.
mobilized, brought to Ukraine, and killed in less than a week.
So they're almost through all the orcs they mobilized. So they're gonna try mobilizing another 300 or to 500,000 to be killed in a few months.
Yeah, the first wave
Yeah.
of Mobics have mostly been massacred already, so they're mobilizing another set.
And this
Yeah,
hasn't
it-
deterred them in the slightest.
It was so crazy. It's like when this mobilization only started, like first days of this mobilization, and Putin was saying that of course mobilized people will not be brought to the front line. They will be protecting law and order on the occupied territories, on the annexed territories, and in like 6 days, there's a report of a dude who got like mobilized and killed in 6 days, and I think that he died near Solidar, by the way, which is completely opposite direction from like Kherson or Mariupol.
Right.
You know, now there was a crazy story about a pedophile from Neftekamsk. So he was convicted for doing horrible things, and he was staying in prison, detained, and he was recruited to this Prigozhin's Wagner group, and he was recruited. He was killed near Solidar, and his body was brought back to Neftekamsk, Russian city of Neftekamsk, where he was buried honorably, and like honorable guard was set next to his grave, that were basically children wearing military uniforms and having rifles.
Wow.
So a pedophile, Russian pedophile, actually now has honorable guard consisting of children.
That is
only
just
in Russia.
revolting. Yeah. Oh my God.
No irony here, none at all.
Huh.
Move on,
Oh.
citizen.
Oh, and just for reference again, Fort Pierce, Florida is approximately 5 times the pre-war population of Solidar, which was, I think, 10,400 or something.
Yeah, something like that, around 10,000 men. And I think even comparing to Rubizhne was a bit bigger, even though it was like a big village.
I wanted to I had a thing I was going to bring up here. There was news that the armored personnel carriers from Canada, did they actually show up, Starsky? Do you know? There was 200 of them.
Well, I know that they will be brought to Ukraine. Nobody knows the exact date, of course.
Oh yeah, okay, I'm seeing here. Yeah, and then there's also Canada purchased surface to air missile NASAM as well. That's going to be in the package.
Actually, I have a full list. So from Britain, we receive 14 Challenger 2 tanks, 600 Brimstone missiles, 30 155 millimeter howitzers, and 200 APCs and infantry fighting vehicles. From Canada, we will receive 200 Senator armored vehicles and 1 battery of anti-air system NASAMS. From Poland, we will receive 14 Leopard tanks. And from the US, the list is very, very long. So we will have 100 Bradleys, 100 M113s, 18 self-propelled howitzers, 250 armored vehicles, not including 138 Humvees, 100 Striker APCs, and we will also receive GLSDB, those bombs, and 36 105 millimeter howitzers, 1 Patriot system, 6 NASAMS systems, and 18 additional HIMARS systems. And there's a long list. From France, we will receive 40 AMX-10 tanks and armored vehicles called Bastion. Not familiar with those. From Germany, we will get 40 infantry fighting vehicles type Marder, 1 Patriot system, 3 Iris-T systems, together with 3 radio location systems, and 2 additional radio location systems, and a lot of things that we will also receive from the Netherlands, from Czechia, Slovakia, and Sweden, and Italy, and Estonia. And yeah, it's amazing. Of course, the only thing we need in big numbers is tanks.
Yeah.
Because prior to this war, Russia had 10,000 tanks. Okay, not all of them were functioning properly.
Mhm.
And let's say they already lost more than 3,000 tanks in this war. So currently they have between 6 and 7, I would say, 1,000 tanks, which is still more than I think whole Europe has.
Yeah.
Because
That's an insane number.
yeah, because in Ukraine, we had something like 800 active tanks. Generally, we had 1,500 tanks, something like that, in total, which already was more than all the tanks in Europe combined. And Russia had almost 10 times of that.
And you have more tanks today now, just from Russia donating them, so to speak, than you did.
Land leasing to Ukraine.
Jean-Marc Paganel in the chat says some of them are already there. They're just taking time to build and then getting shipped and whatnot. But they're shipping at 5 at a time, I believe. So some are there already. Okay, good update. Good update. Yeah, because that's why I was confused. One article said that one Ukrainian official had said thanks because for they arrived, but then another one said that they're getting ready to ship. So I was really confused there. So thanks for the check there. Cool. Okay. Well, we have a super chat in, don't we there, Claire? I wonder if Claire's ready.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I'm ready. Okay, from Little Kickens 2. Does Ukraine have problems with Russian POWs in alcohol withdrawal?
When you're dealing generally with Russians, you always have such problems. Doesn't matter if they're POWs or like your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, that's typical for them.
All right.
Maybe the alcohol is why they keep bursting into flames every time they smoke and taking out ammunition dumps.
It's the
Yeah, that
strangest
could be the
thing.
reason. Yeah, the amount of spirit inside one's body, you know.
They're like walking Molotov cocktails. All they need is a wick in their mouth.
It is a significant problem. I remember when I did an exercise with the Russian Navy, one of the admirals they had that came with their squadron, he was so drunk that he couldn't come up to the bridge to, take command of the ship and direct operations. They had to have somebody else come up and do it for him because he was just passed out in his bed, rolling in his own vomit.
Inspiring confidence from the
Oh,
top
yeah,
down.
And Operator Starsky, do you have any idea how many of the mallet shifting T-34s make up the remainder of it?
I think we can Google that actually, but I think they have quite a few of those. I know that had huge reserve of those T-34 tanks, and they were sent to different countries. Some of them are still in service, by the way. I think a couple of years ago I was checking the information on that, and yeah, to my surprise, I found out that some of T-34 tanks are still active. Either in the Middle East or in some African countries, they're still in service.
North Korea has some too.
Oh yeah, they do.
Yeah, but the Russians don't have any in service anymore. Yeah. And I was going to comment earlier, the 10,000 number that Starsky has talked about for the Russian tanks, only probably a third of that was active force. The rest of it is tanks that are sitting in open air parking lots, rusting away. But, they can drag them back to the factory, rework them, and send them to the front. They are, by modern day standards, many of them obsolete, but it's got armor, it's got a big gun, it does what it needs to. Just probably going to be a lot easier to make the crew experience a fatal outcome of their action.
Yeah, 35,000 tanks, T-34 tanks were produced in the Soviet Union. 35,000 tanks. It's amazing, and
Wow.
It's not including the T-34 85 tanks. It's another modification, and there were 25, almost 30. Oh my God! So
Yeah.
they had 30,000 of T-34s tanks and 30,000 of these modifications. So in general, they produced 60,000 tanks, and
that's just the T-34s. They had lots of other tank types that they were producing during the war.
oh yeah,
I think the total number is something close to 200,000.
yeah, something like that. And
Oh my
there are
God.
current operators of those tanks. So, for example, Vietnam, Guinea-Bissau, Yemen, North Korea, Congo, Cuba, and even Russia. They still operate those tanks. 30 T-34 tanks were given to Russia by the Ministry of Defense of Laos for demonstrational purpose and recording movies and things like that.
Unbelievable production. How many of those people, I wonder, producing all those tanks actually got paid or were just forced to do it?
It was made in Soviet times. It was very different back then. Basically, they had a lot of slaves that could work 24/7 and produce a lot of things.
Right.
And nobody cared about people. Then people became a bit more spoiled with like glasnost, yeah, food,
furniture,
oh yeah,
running water.
people from rural areas in the
Ladas.
end of 70s finally started receiving IDs, passports, because they couldn't have those. And in the 90s they became a bit more spoiled because they started receiving salaries, which is great, and nobody would shoot you for, you know, for having rights. And
God forbid you got caught wearing blue jeans.
That's what I was gonna say.
oh my god, blue jeans in the Soviet Union, it was something freaking incredible. It was like, imagine bringing an iPhone to North Korea, for example.
Yeah.
It was like that. So people who had jeans, Russia, like Soviet Russia, of course, tried to produce their own jeans. They didn't look much like jeans, and they sucked. But people who had friends among like sailors or international pilots, you know, things like that, they could find a way to buy those jeans and sell them to Soviet citizens for like incredible money.
I bet.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I mean the sailors on the squadron that came to Hawaii that I did that exercise with, when they had free time, it had to be supervised, of course, but that was one of the main things they wanted to do, was go to the shopping center, and they spent all their money buying blue jeans.
yeah, exactly. Because salary for Soviet officer was about 45 rubles, something like that. 45, 100 rubles, depending on the rank and responsibility and yada yada. But the price for jeans could be up to 200 rubles. So it's like spending 4 salaries for a pair of pants.
What was toilet
Wow.
paper in the Soviet Union costing in the 1960s and 70s?
Didn't exist.
So I always joke about it because they only started producing toilet paper in Soviet Union 8 years after they launched Yuri Gagarin into space. It's
Priorities, man, priorities.
Oh yeah, it's
Do
like,
they even
imagine
produce toilets there?
imagine Yuri Gagarin was the first person who flew into space. By the way, he was sent there by Mr. Korolev, who was Ukrainian. He was born in Zhytomyr, and he was sent into space. And when he returned, he went straight to bathroom, and he took a dump and he wiped his ass with a newspaper because they had no freaking toilet paper.
Wow. Oh.
So Pravda was actually good for something.
Yeah.
See?
That was the only thing it was good for, because I still remember those days when you would come to a village, for example. And we had those newspapers in the toilet all the time, and they had this gvozdik. So it's like a meme. In the outhouse, you have like a nail, gvozdik, and you put all the Pravda newspapers on that nail. And when there's some worthless thing in your life, we used to say, put it on the gvozdik, on the nail, because it's only good for wiping ass.
Pravda means truth in Russian, which means if you find a YouTube channel that says truth on it, 9 times out of 10, it's
Bullshit.
if you could wipe your ass with it, it
Oh,
would be
yeah.
better.
Well, let's switch over to Claire here. We got a couple of super chats and whatnot, and she's got a question. Did I go too quick for you?
Sorry, my mic button got stuck there for a second. Okay, from Anthony Beswick. Solution to the tank issue. Germany agreed to sell tanks to both Ukraine and Russians, but due to sanctions, Russia must wait until sanctions end to get them. It's a twist. From Stephen Walsh, a new member. Are there any other modern or less than modern tanks in Western inventories that could help Ukraine? Maybe M60? Are there other countries we could reach out to help Ukraine?
Let's say, of course, we can fight with like muskets because we don't care, but to fight officially against modern tanks, let's say Soviet tanks are not very modern, considering they were built like 50 years ago, but still, they have stabilizing systems, they have thermal vision cameras and things like that, and we have to have such things as well to fight them properly. That's why not all the old tanks can be used. For example, Russians currently use T-62 tanks, which was the latest type of Soviet tanks that had no modern equipment like the one I was talking about. After T-62, they built T-64 already equipped with stabilizers and all that fancy things. So currently they're using them, and even despite the fact that it's a tank, it can still kill, but most of the times it just burns down due to our fire.
Yeah, I think the key thing to note is that if you do use older tanks, and yeah, there are probably a bunch of older tanks we could source to give Ukraine, but older tanks mean you're exposing the crew to much more danger, and you probably want to avoid doing that. You don't want to increase your personnel losses. I know, for example, that the Slovenia gave you guys a bunch of modified T-54s or T-55s. It's a good system, but it's not something you want to put directly on the front line because it isn't as survivable. It isn't as efficient as a more modern vehicle.
Yeah, not into offensive operation, for example, because it will not survive long. But for protecting cities, for example, yes, it could be used.
Yeah. That kind of goes along with the question from Rodent No Last Name. Is there any captured Russian equipment that Ukraine could actually use, or is all the orc equipment just junk?
No. A lot of things can be used and is used already. We captured a lot of tanks. Again, they don't have too many T-64 tanks, which are more, I would say, reliable than the rest of the tanks. But we still use them, and we use them well. T-72 and such tanks. And we also captured one of the latest tanks that are equipped with some specific blanket that protects this tank from thermal vision cameras. And
Wow.
we put that one into a good use. I saw a video of that being towed to our positions, and we received a lot of things. So we found a bunch of their radio electronic warfare machines. In Izum, for example, we captured some of them. We captured things like Pantsir, their anti-air system that has missiles, cannons, and anything you can imagine. They're not bad. And what there was some crazy story about some guy from a village who found Smerch. Smerch is multiple rocket launch system, and he found this empty system just like in the woods, and he talked to a military commander of the armed forces of Ukraine about this. He said, like, do you need that machine? He said, no, we don't, because we don't have ammunition. We cannot load it. We don't have such shells, right? And he's like, then, like, what do we do with it? Commander said, you keep it. So there was this crazy picture of this gentleman from rural area, like a farmer, with huge Smerch truck on the background. And he sent this picture to his cousin who lives in Russia, and just to troll her a bit. Yeah, so things like that happen all the time.
So I've heard two things, and maybe you can confirm or deny them. One is that you've acquired more T-80s from captured Russian equipment than you had before the start of the war.
I think that we are more efficient using T-64s, T-64 tanks.
Mm-hmm.
We have plenty of factories that can modify those tanks, and we did that prior to the invasion. We had, I think, a Ukrainian version of tank, T-64 tank. As for T-90s and other stuff, I don't know much about them, unfortunately.
The other one I heard, and again, this one I actually think is kind of dubious, but I'll ask anyway, that you have received from the Russians as donated gifts more T-72s than you have lost in the fighting.
Yes, that one is true.
Wow.
Something like 40% of our tanks were actually Russian tanks. We lost, let's say, we received more tanks that we lost, and specifically T-74 type.
Wow.
During the short time the Russians controlled the Chernobyl area, did they actually try to strip all those old irradiated tanks to repair stuff, or are those vehicles actually floating around somewhere, the radioactive ones?
I heard about such cases. I cannot confirm or disconfirm them, but there's another thing. All of their tanks, they were stored in trenches for obvious reasons. All of their tanks, all of their trucks, and things like that. So their own tanks became radioactive.
Wow. Kind of goes hand in hand with, I mean, they've proven time and time again that they don't give a rat's ass for their own soldiers anyway. So, Well, we don't have too much longer, so let's go to Dave for a couple of more questions, and we'll see if we can't get ourselves right to the end in a lovely manner.
Sure, sure. Sweet's got a really interesting question that I hadn't even thought of. Are Ukrainian farmers concerned about planting crops in spring with landmines, etc.?
Of course they are, and of course currently we have plenty of EOD teams, not only Ukrainian teams. Our state rescue service is always involved into finding landmines and shells, but we also have plenty of foreign volunteers searching for those landmines and other remnants of war. Of course, they are concerned, especially in those areas where we had some combat, or we know that Russians were there. I just remembered one thing. You know Alexander Usyk, Ukrainian boxer.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So he received a, like, let's call it a landmine from Russians. So when Kadyrovites occupied his house in Irpin, they took a shit into a cradle of his baby, empty cradle.
Whoa.
Yeah, and that's basically the reason why formerly pro-Russian Alexander Usyk is now he hates them so much.
Wow.
Toilets
what,
are where you go to the bathroom. It's not that thing that you just use to decorate your fleeing vehicles.
Yeah. They just can't get the whole, that side of life right, can they?
Yeah. The unexploded ordnance thing is a big issue, and not just in Ukraine. For example, there are sections of France which you still can't really safely go into because of all the World War I unexploded ordnance that's still buried in the soil. When I lived in Egypt, the estimate was that between 1 to 3 people died every year from all the mines that had not been cleared from the North African campaign in World War II.
Mm.
So it's a global problem with unexploded ordnance.
Yeah, there's still a lot of them in places like Vietnam, for example.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Even in the UK, I mean, we always hear these stories of unexploded landmines that get found in the Thames or just something from World War II, and it's just like, yeah, awkward. Just literal
Must be
ticking time bombs.
Yeah, it must be scary when they're that old, because how stable could it still be?
Right.
Wow. Well, let's do one last question and we'll say our goodbyes and everything here.
Yeah, sure. There was one from Devram, and I keep thinking about this question every week. I don't know if I'm asking it every week, but it's in my head. The question was Starsky: are Ukrainians ready for a very long war? Unfortunately, this seems to take long. And I noticed over the past year or so of doing these streams, we always talk about, okay, this is we're going to end this, we're going to win this war. I mean, looking at particularly mentioning World War II, we've still got beef with the Germans, for God's sake. I mean, I don't see this sort of going away in 100 years, let alone anytime soon. Right? You can't really forget that they're raping your children, surely.
The war in Ukraine started 9 years ago. So
yeah, with Crimea. Yeah.
That's the answer.
Yeah. Fair point.
Well, let's let's all say goodbye and good night to everybody here. We got to remind you guys, you got to keep on your local politicians and whatnot to urge support for Ukraine. You can do a lot on your own in your own time in life and whatnot as well. There's just so many areas that a person can make just a tiny contribution that can make a big difference when we're all doing it. So let's do that. And big thanks to y'all for coming out and watching us today and, supporting the channel. Thanks to everybody for the super chats and whatnot. We'll make sure they get used properly. And we'll turn to Starsky here for final thoughts on the evening.
Thank you so much for your support, guys. I must say that you are always my biggest inspiration and motivation. Thank you so much for wonderful questions. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.
Okay.
All right. Take care, everybody. Slava
Bye.
Ukraini.
Night.
At all.
Good night.
Lava.
It's over. Go home.